there's going to have to be some decisions made. What if one film didn't just imagine the end of the world, but forced audiences to feel it? Threads wasn't just a Cold War drama. It was a brutal experiment in realism, a production that pushed actors, executives, and even entire broadcasters past their comfort zone. It wasn't entertainment. It was an emotional shockwave. Today, we're revealing 20 weird, wild, and little-known facts about Threads. 1984. The secrets that reshaped how disaster films were made. Now, let's begin. Fact number 1. The film was originally too disturbing, even for the BBC. Threads begins as a straightforward drama, but even the early drafts push boundaries. The BBC expects a cautionary piece, not a near documentary. When producers turn in the script, executives reportedly freeze. The tone isn't dramatic. It's devastating. The BBC almost shelves the project entirely. Writers argue the realism is the entire point. It shouldn't comfort anyone, one producer reportedly says during a meeting. Not optimism, but confrontation. The final approval only comes after the BBC agrees to air warnings before the premiere. What audiences didn't know is that the version that aired was already toned down compared to the original plan, yet it still becomes one of the most intense TV movies ever made. Threads moves ahead, but with constant internal debate about how close to reality it should get. Fact number 2. The story was inspired by real government briefings. Long before cameras roll, the writer Barry Hines spends weeks researching actual nuclear preparedness reports. He reads government documents describing how city councils across the UK would handle a large-scale attack. The findings shock him, not confidence, but confusion. The more he investigates, the more he realizes local officials would be overwhelmed instantly. These reports shape the core message of the film: ordinary people in charge of extraordinary disasters. What audiences didn't know was that many lines spoken by city officials in the film come almost word for word from real manuals and emergency procedure documents. The realism isn't an accident, it's research. Threads isn't predicting chaos, it's recreating what officials already fear. Fact number 3. Sheffield was chosen because it couldn't be faked anywhere else. Most disaster films build massive sets. Threads doesn't. The director chooses the real city of Sheffield because its architecture, street layout, and dense population make it an ideal real-world stand-in for nuclear impact modeling. But there's a problem. Sheffield officials worry residents might panic when they see film crews staging widespread destruction around town. Burnt-out buildings, overturned cars, and smoke plumes rising over neighborhoods. Some locals even call emergency services during filming, believing real events are unfolding. It wasn't spectacle. It was confusion blending into reality. The choice of Sheffield grounds the film in authenticity, a city caught between its real identity and its fictional fate. Fact number 4. Many extras didn't know the full plot. To maintain realism, the director uses a technique more common in experimental films: limited information. Many background actors receive only minimal direction. You're confused. You're frightened. You're trying to understand what's happening. They don't get the full script. As a result, reactions in wide shots appear raw. Extras aren't reciting lines. They're responding to sudden cues, bursts of sound, collapsing props, or crowds rushing past them. Not staged fear, but reactive confusion. Some extras later admit they had no idea how bleak the story becomes until they watch the finished film. For them, filming feels like participating in a large emergency simulation, without knowing the outcome. Fact number 5. The BBC used real emergency sound recordings. Instead of dramatic music, Threads frequently uses authentic emergency alert tones and civil defense signals from archival sources. These recordings come from real drills performed during the Cold War. During editing, the sound designer layers them subtly under scenes to create tension that most viewers can feel, but not consciously identify. Not soundtrack, but psychological pressure. These tones cause an instinctive reaction in many listeners. They're designed to. What audiences didn't know is that some staff members asked to leave the editing room because the constant alarms are too overwhelming. The film isn't just watched, it's felt through sound. Fact number 6. The animal scenes follow strict safety standards. One of the most distressing parts of Threads involves the collapse of infrastructure affecting wildlife. But despite rumors, all animals used in the film are handled safely and never placed in harm's way. Production crews use clever editing, environmental props, and fast cuts to imply devastation without filming anything dangerous. The BBC enforces strict rules: no animal endangerment, no harsh conditions, and constant supervision by welfare officers. Not real destruction, but carefully constructed illusions. The power of these scenes comes from suggestion, not depiction, a testament to practical effects that trick the mind while keeping every living creature safe. Fact number 7. One scene was so intense, it caused real emotional breakdowns. There is a moment in Threads where chaos erupts in the streets. Actors run, alarms blare, and debris falls around them. Even though it's staged, the environment feels overwhelmingly real. Some performers, especially extras unused to such scenes, experience genuine emotional distress. The director halts filming multiple times so cast members can regroup. They're not hurt, just overwhelmed. Not acting, but human reaction. The production moves slowly that day, and the resulting footage contains a mix of rehearsed and authentic emotional responses. This layered realism becomes one of the reasons the scene is remembered decades later. Fact number 8. A simple prop malfunctions and creates one of the film's best shots. During a chaotic outdoor sequence, a smoke device malfunctions and releases more smoke than planned. The cloud thickens faster than the crew expects, rolling across the street and obscuring entire buildings. Instead of cutting, the director keeps rolling. What they capture is eerie, atmospheric, and almost symbolic. A city swallowed by haze. Not a controlled effect, but an accident. Editors later highlight the moment because it blends seamlessly with the film's tone. It becomes a reminder that some of the most memorable shots in Threads come from chance rather than planning. Fact number 9. The makeup team uses minimal prosthetics. Unlike other disaster films with elaborate prosthetics, Threads relies primarily on subtle makeup techniques, pale tones, ash effects, and lighting tricks. The result is unsettling realism without relying on heavy fictional designs. Makeup artists work with natural light and handheld mirrors during outdoor shoots to match tones with the shifting sky. Not monster effects, but grounded human detail. What audiences didn't know is how simple many of the techniques are. A mixture of charcoal dust, diluted paint, and a few carefully placed smudges. The impact comes from context, not volume. Sometimes the smallest decisions create the biggest reactions. Fact number 10. The director hides visual messages in the background. Around the halfway mark, Threads shifts from narrative realism to something more symbolic, but not openly. Director Mick Jackson begins layering subtle visual messages into the background of wide shots. These details are small enough to miss casually, yet intentional enough to carry meaning. Faded political posters hang half-torn on crumbling walls. Abandoned prams sit on sidewalks. Street signs lie broken in gutters. Each one is a reminder of something no longer functioning. Jackson calls these elements quiet commentary. They're not inserts or stylized props. They're fragments placed where ordinary life used to be. Sometimes the camera only catches them for a second. Sometimes they linger at the edge of the frame while characters talk. Viewers don't always consciously notice them, but they feel them. Not obvious symbolism, but environmental storytelling. Fact number 11. The BBC debated canceling filming after a real global event. During production, growing international tension makes the script feel alarmingly close to real life. A sudden geopolitical incident hits the headlines, and BBC executives immediately worry about timing. They gather for an emergency meeting to discuss whether Threads should continue filming at all. The fear isn't artistic controversy. It's public reaction. Executives think releasing a film about global conflict during an actual crisis could cause unnecessary alarm or be seen as insensitive. Some strongly suggest pausing or delaying production. Others propose scaling back the script, but director Mick Jackson argues the opposite. The film becomes more important when the world feels unstable. This is precisely why we're making it, he insists. Not retreat, but resolve. After several days of internal debate, the BBC chooses to proceed, but under tighter oversight. Additional review meetings are required, and every new scene is evaluated carefully. By the time the film eventually airs, the real-world tensions have eased. But the timing remains remembered as eerily parallel. Sometimes fiction and reality move in the same direction, just a few steps apart. Fact number 12. Actors perform in real abandoned buildings. Rather than building sets, the production team chooses actual derelict buildings scattered around Sheffield. These structures, already marked for demolition, give the film an authenticity that no studio construction could match. They are cold, echoing, and eerie, the kind of places where the smallest sound lingers longer than expected. Not studio lights, but natural shadows. When actors step inside these spaces, they instantly feel the weight of the story they're telling. Walls flake with dust. Windows rattle in the wind, and uneven floors make every footstep sound uncertain. Cast members later describe these locations as emotionally influencing their performances. The silence between takes grows heavy. Even rehearsals feel strangely solemn. Production crews ensure safety, but intentionally keep the look untouched. Peeling wallpaper, rusted pipes, sagging ceilings. These unaltered details deepen the sense of collapse that defines the film's tone. What audiences didn't know is that much of the unease they feel during interior scenes isn't created by lighting or camera work. It comes from the buildings themselves. Real spaces filled with real echoes of an abandoned past. The environment becomes an uncredited character, shaping every moment. Fact number 13. The film uses real civil defense volunteers. One of the most unusual choices in Threads is the inclusion of real civil defense volunteers. These individuals already train for emergency scenarios in their daily lives. Their presence lends accuracy no actor could fully replicate. They know how to hold equipment correctly, how to stand during briefings, and how communication chains work under pressure. Not actors pretending, but trained personnel performing naturally. When they appear in scenes involving emergency coordination or community instructions, their movements feel authentic. They advise the director about realistic procedures, such as how responders might prioritize tasks or handle communication failures. Their feedback even influences several scene rewrites, ensuring the film reflects actual protocol rather than dramatized assumptions. For the cast, working alongside them becomes an unexpected training experience. Actors observe subtle details, posture, urgency, tone, and incorporate these behaviors into their own performances. What audiences didn't know is that some of the calmest, most procedural moments in the film come directly from these volunteers. They don't deliver speeches. They deliver presence. Their involvement creates a bridge between fiction and real emergency preparedness, grounding the film in lived expertise rather than imagination. Fact number 14. Filmmakers consult scientists for accurate environmental effects. The environmental decline portrayed in Threads feels disturbingly authentic, and that's no accident. Before writing key scenes, the production team consults meteorologists, environmental scientists, and historians who specialize in long-term urban impact. These experts advise on everything from weather patterns to agricultural breakdowns. Not random decay, but evidence-based modeling. Scientists outline how food shortages might progress, how disrupted communication systems collapse, and how infrastructure fails over time. They also help refine the film's pacing, explaining the sequence in which essential services would decline. The final timeline in the movie isn't just storytelling. It mirrors academic projections remarkably closely. What audiences didn't know is that many background details come straight from scientific notes. The dimmer daylight, the altered soil conditions, the gradual disappearance of street noise. Even small visual cues follow researched logic. The goal isn't fear, it's clarity. By grounding environmental effects in real scientific expectations, Threads becomes one of the few fictional films that genuinely matches scholarly modeling. The result is unsettling, not because it's exaggerated, but because it aligns so closely with expert predictions. Fact number 15. Many scenes are shot with minimal rehearsal. To capture genuine uncertainty, director Mick Jackson develops a technique unusual for a film of this scale: minimal rehearsal. Instead of practicing scenes repeatedly, he gives actors broad direction, just enough to explain the emotional stakes, and then begins rolling immediately. Not polished timing, but spontaneous realism. This approach echoes documentary filmmaking. Rather than delivering sharply rehearsed lines, actors respond based on instinct. Their pauses feel real. Their confusion feels lived in. Even their mistakes become part of the texture of the scene. Jackson believes this crafted unpredictability creates a more immersive atmosphere than any rehearsed performance could. Crew members later recall moments where actors seemed to forget the camera existed. They reacted to unfolding events as they would in real life, hesitating, adjusting, searching for cues. The natural rhythm of these reactions becomes a signature of the film's tone. Some actors only realize how powerful these scenes look when they see the final cut. The authenticity that viewers praise isn't the result of meticulous planning. It's the result of letting reality slip into the performance. Authenticity over precision. And it works brilliantly. Fact number 16. Sound mixers use real urban recordings of crowds. Sound plays a crucial role in Threads. Before filming even begins, the audio team spends days recording real city environments around Sheffield: busy streets, markets, schoolyards, and factory districts. These soundscapes become the baseline for the early parts of the film. Then, gradually, the mixers remove them. Not sudden silence, but steady disappearance. As the story progresses, background noise fades bit by bit. Traffic hum lessens. Distant voices become sparse. Marketplace recordings thin out. The sound design mirrors the shrinking normalcy of the world. Viewers don't always consciously notice the change, but they feel the creeping emptiness. Later scenes feature a different mix: wind patterns, hollow echoes, and the faint metallic ring of an altered environment. These sounds aren't synthesized. Many come from real desolate spaces the crew discovers during location scouting. What audiences didn't know is that the film's emotional arc is shaped not just by visuals, but by the soundscape diminishing piece by piece. It becomes an audio map of collapse, a quiet, unsettling reminder of how quickly ordinary life can fade into stillness. Fact number 17. The BBC builds a fake documentary unit within the film. Threads often feels like shifting between a drama and a field report, and that's entirely intentional. To achieve this, the BBC builds a separate mock documentary unit within the main crew. This small team uses different cameras, lenses, and lighting setups designed to replicate real on-scene journalism. Not staged cinema, but simulated journalism. They film with handheld rigs, rougher lighting, and practical angles that mimic emergency documentation. Their footage includes quick pans, imperfect framing, and abrupt zooms, little imperfections that make everything feel captured in the moment rather than staged. Directors place this unit in scenes where events are meant to feel observed rather than performed. Emergency briefings, chaotic street moments, or sudden environmental changes. The stylistic contrast keeps viewers slightly disoriented, unsure when they're watching narrative or documentation. What audiences didn't know is that this dual crew method becomes one of the film's most influential techniques. It blurs the line between fiction and simulation so convincingly that later productions borrow the idea without realizing where it originated. It's a hidden layer of realism, disguised as raw reportage. Fact number 18. Air filtration effects are created with simple household tools. Viewers often assume the environmental haze in Threads comes from specialized film equipment, but the truth is far simpler and far more ingenious. The special effects team works with a limited budget, so they experiment with basic household tools to create atmospheric debris. They use flour sifters to disperse lightweight material into the air. Handheld fans swirl it into drifting patterns. Custom-made boxes release slow streams of biodegradable dust to mimic airborne particles. Not Hollywood machinery, but practical creativity. These materials are completely safe and non-toxic, chosen specifically to avoid hazards for cast and crew. When combined with natural wind and low lighting, the result is astonishingly convincing. The air takes on a textured look that feels organic rather than manufactured. What audiences didn't know is that some of the film's most haunting environmental visuals cost almost nothing to produce. They rely on timing, weather, and careful placement rather than advanced technology. The realism works because it's grounded in simplicity. Everyday items transformed into cinematic atmosphere. Fact number 19. The ending was originally much longer. The ending of Threads leaves viewers stunned, partly because of its abruptness. But the original script includes a significantly longer final sequence. This earlier version explores life years after the catastrophic event, offering more detail about long-term societal changes and emerging challenges. But during editing, the BBC grows concerned that the extended ending might overwhelm audiences or shift the tone from impactful to unrelenting. They want the message to be powerful, not oppressive. Not extended resolution, but sharpened focus. Director Mick Jackson eventually agrees to shorten the final act. Instead of showing years of progression, the film jumps forward briefly, giving only a stark glimpse of the future. This choice compresses the emotional impact into a single, concentrated moment. Viewers are left with unanswered questions, and that is intentional. Jackson later says the shorter ending lets silence carry meaning, implying that some conclusions are best left implied rather than explained. What audiences didn't know is that the power of the ending comes not from what it shows, but from what it deliberately withholds. Fact number 20. The film's premiere causes an unexpected viewer reaction. When Threads finally premieres, the BBC prepares for viewer concerns, expecting immediate emotional reactions. But something strange happens. Phone lines remain almost completely quiet for the first short period after the broadcast. Staff worry the system has failed. Then, the calls begin. Not panic, but stunned reflection. Viewers explain that the silence wasn't avoidance. It was processing. People needed time to sit with what they had watched. Some describe the film as the most sobering broadcast they've ever seen. Teachers request educational copies. Local councils ask for the research behind the production. Preparedness groups use the film to open discussions. The reaction isn't outrage or fear. It's contemplation. The BBC realizes they didn't just air a drama. They released a national conversation. The film transcends its broadcast slot, becoming part of public discourse on responsibility, readiness, and community planning. What audiences didn't know is that Thread's cultural impact begins not with its viewers' immediate reaction, but with their initial silence. Reflection becomes the real response, marking the film as a rare piece of television that reshapes how people think rather than how they feel in the moment. Threads remains one of the most impactful films ever broadcast on television, not because of spectacle, but because of precision, research, and a commitment to honesty. It wasn't a drama. It was a warning disguised as storytelling. It proved that filmmaking can inform as powerfully as it can entertain. If you learned something new today, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets. Remember, the scariest stories aren't imagined. They're the ones built from reality.